Luminous Productions has one of the industry's most interesting reputations. Previously Business Division 2, they existed within Square Enix's 12 business divisions. You might know the studio from their work on projects such as Final Fantasy Type 0, Final Fantasy Monsters of the Deep, and most notably up until this point, their mainline Final Fantasy entry, Final Fantasy 15. They've been on quite the ride over the last 5 years or so. Final Fantasy 15 had arguably the most troubled development of a Final Fantasy game, only second to 14, which is exactly why their next project, Forspoken, has me so excited. A studio whose last game went through hell and back wouldn't typically get you excited for their next game, so what's the special case here? Despite basically being put on a timer to release 15 after its re-reveal and rebranding in 2013, it came out to mostly critical acclaim. It had its issues here and there that were mostly remedied post-launch with extensive support for the game. That was until Square Enix decided they wanted to shift those remaining resources over to different projects, cancelling the remaining 3 DLC that had yet to enter full development. Project lead Hajime Tabata did a really good job under the circumstances he was given. He cleaned up the project quite nicely and released it under his new direction to some of the highest lifetime sales in franchise history. You might find some angry fans online in regards to 15's story direction post a versus 13 reality, but it's mostly out of the realm of good criticism and more of them expecting something they were no longer promised after the game's rebranding and reveal back in 2013. But that's a story for another day, a day which is coming sooner rather than later. Luminous Productions is a very talented team, with potential to hang with the best in the industry. Under better circumstances, and with the amount of time they should have had to complete 15, I can't even imagine what we would have gotten considering how good what we got was. After the cancellation of multiple DLCs and Hajime Tabata's choice to leave the newly formed Luminous Productions, it seemed like we were never going to get to see the potential fulfilled. However, Luminous was known to be working on a new AAA IP, which after a long couple years was revealed in June 2020 at PlayStation's Future of Gaming Showcase under the working title Project Athia, which 9 months later was revealed under its final name, Forspoken. Forspoken is an interesting collaboration. The story team is being led by Gary Whitta, whom you might best know from his work on Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which is interesting in and itself because Luminous Productions is based in Japan and there happens to be a lot of collaboration on this specific game with talent in the West. Even more surprising is that the game's story concept was co-developed by Amy Hennig. For those who don't know, Amy Hennig started her video game career on the Legacy of Kain games dating all the way back to 1999. But more notably, she's the creator of the Uncharted franchise and its wonderful cast of characters. Amy Hennig wrote every Uncharted game excluding 4 and had left Naughty Dog during its development. She did some writing on Battlefield Hardline in 2015, but afterwards she had gone on to work on her very own Star Wars game for EA with Visceral Games, which was later cancelled due to EA wanting to rush the game out as it was taking a long time to be developed, combined with their puzzling theory that linear single-player narrative-driven games were becoming a thing of the past. Funny how that turned out. I'm not sure what kind of person it takes to call off what would have been Star Wars Uncharted, but they went ahead and did it. Amy Hennig hasn't gotten to release something she played a large writer's role in since Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. It's criminal, but it makes her addition to Forspoken that much more exciting. The main composer was also announced to be Bear McCreary, who by now is most known for his amazing work composing 2018's God of War, with credits also including AMC's The Walking Dead, Godzilla King of Monsters, this year's Call of Duty Vanguard, and of course 2022's God of War Ragnarok. If you need any reassurance that the music in this game is going to heighten every single moment, feel free to listen to God of War's OST. I think you'll get the idea. The game is also going to have some tracks in it written by Gary Shyman, who is best known for composing the entire BioShock series, as well as both Middle-earth games. The only person I think would make this lineup of composers any more unstoppable would be Austin Wintory, composer of Journey, Abzu, and The Pathless. It seems like Square Enix and Luminous really went above and beyond to form a very specific team for this game. Every pick seems so carefully intentional, and it's exciting to see all the pieces come together. The gameplay for Forspoken will, like most games, be one of the most important pieces of what sets this game apart, and it's the spot to be the least concerned about. For how admittedly easy Final Fantasy XV's difficulty was, the combat brought new ideas to the table that keep me coming back to play it almost every year. The first being the combat animation work. Business Division 2 went above and beyond here to immerse players. Every attack was so smooth and believable looking, which is sometimes a tall order for action games with a lot going on at once. Noctis's movements are very loose, and even more impressive is the combo attacks with different members of the party. They never get old to execute. Freya looks to borrow some of Noctis's mannerisms, which was immediately apparent to me upon its reveal as Project Athia. Freya and Noctis have a very similar jump and smoothness to their movements that is especially apparent as she navigates the open world. Forspoken uses a movement system which Luminous Productions have branded Magic Parkour to get around its massive world. It's so clear that this is the next evolution of what they started with 15's maneuverability with the Warp Strike, which brought fantastic depth to the combat, and an impressive level of control in the air that I hadn't yet seen in an action combat game. Using the Warp Strike to escape an attack quickly and reposition in combat to then just warp back in wasting no time brought 15's moment-to-moment gameplay a step above a lot of games. As a result, moving around the continent of Athia with Magic Parkour, simply put, looks like pure, unadulterated fun. The combat looks to be more than just simple spells and magic. The massive spells on display in the footage we've seen thus far have an impressive level of detail, but fighting at a distance might not be some people's forte. In its most recent footage, Freya is able to conjure weapons using her magic to fight in close quarters. Another idea which I can't help but compare to 15's use of the magic of the gods to conjure the main party's weapons out of thin air and switch them on the fly with ease. It's always a welcome use of the fantasy genre to aid in much more stimulating combat, and it also helps avoid an annoying over-encumberment issue some games still seem to suffer with when they don't even need to. Forspoken runs on the Luminous engine, which at one point seemed like a death sentence for a Square Enix game. During Final Fantasy XIII-2's development, which was done on the Crystal Tools engine, the Luminous engine was in development because work on Final Fantasy Versus 13 was meeting roadblocks due to Crystal Tools not being designed to support large open-world environments. A tech demo under the name Agni's Philosophy was created using these new tools, which wowed fans of Square Enix upon its first reveal. Final Fantasy XV would be the first full title to be built from the ground up on Luminous Engine, which proved to be a challenge to work around as it wasn't fully completed yet, while other projects like Kingdom Hearts 3 moved to Unreal Engine. It caused some technical issues with 15's initial launch, but everything seems to be in a great spot all these years later. 15 was a beautiful game graphically, and Forspoken uses its same art style to bring the continent of Athia to life. The story of Forspoken follows protagonist Freya, played by Ella Balinski. Freya is a New York City native with a less than optimal upbringing, and after being transported to a brand new fantasy world unlike her own, she sets off a series of events where she becomes a threat to the Tantus, who are the leaders of Athia. Tanta Sila, the head of the Tantus, was once the leader of Athia's defense who led an army. Freya's arrival to Athia seems to pose a threat that sets off the events of the game, and with the magical talking cuffs on her hand, appropriately named Cuff, I think the West specifically will be getting a type of story they aren't quite used to, which is refreshing. There have been some concerns on some of the lines from Freya in the trailers we've seen thus far, but you have to understand that this character has just arrived in a fantasy world and now possesses powers non-existent in her own world. We've only seen footage from early on in the game, and it's not that wild that she might be on Cloud 9 for a while until she acclimates to the brand new world. I think you might be a little excited as well. We don't have to wait too much longer for Forspoken to release, as it's slated for spring 2022, which isn't too far off. Between some of the untapped potential of Final Fantasy XV and refreshing new ideas for movement and combat, there's a lot to look forward to. In a world of increasingly generic open-world game formulas, Forspoken seems to be changing this up. Luminous Productions has everything to prove with this game, and it just makes the wait that much more excruciating. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you all think.